Hey everybody, welcome to some interviews for the summit. I'm here with Joe Firestone from the Joe Firestone streams, and he's going to be co-hosting with me today.
Folks.
So we're going to start off by talking to our events director. So Indy, can you tell everybody a little bit about how you got involved with KRTD and how you got involved with this event and what you've been doing?
Sure, absolutely. Again, I appreciate you inviting me on the stream, and we're really excited to produce this event together. About 6 months ago or so. Now, what I've done is I've built a website and a Discord server where we showcase all kinds of independent leftist content, free of corporate narrative. Shane and I had become friends through the Discord, and he told me about this media company he's building, KRTD Media. He's looking for some advisors to his organization, and could I join as an advisor to be and to bring the perspective from the left and from the independent side? And I thought that was a terrific idea, so I immediately said yes. And he told me about this event that he had planned. I thought that was terrific. So, and originally he said Shane told me that we had Mark Charles and Steph Zamorano and Shahid Buttar, and I said, wow, that's pretty incredible. Why don't we see who we can get in addition to that? And so I started reaching out to some of the folks that I cover on the left, folks like Jimmy Dore, folks like the Convo Couch, folks like Hardlens Media. And what was amazing is that every single person that we contacted and reached out to thought this was also a terrific idea and wanted to participate. And so the U.S. Solutions Summit came to be about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And I joined the KRTD Media team as the events director after joining the advisory board. We laid out a plan. We chose who our speakers were going to be. We then decided what the content and what the topics were going to be based upon who the speakers were going to be. So we wanted to choose topics that were passions of the speakers that we were bringing, but also that they were experts in. So we're super excited about the way that this has come together. The team has worked together tremendously to assemble a star-studded event. It's going to be power-packed. We're going to have a 5-hour-long event with 6 panels. Shane, do you have any other questions about the event?
Joe, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. The event is going to be unusual, I think, in that it's going to be focusing on solutions, not simply on the problems. What we mostly hear from our people is about the problems and how we have to do something about them. But the specifics of what we're supposed to do are not so clear. So I guess my expectation is, Indy, will the panels that have been formed now, will they keep the focus on the solutions?
Well, that's the idea, and that's what the moderators are going to be there to do. And we're going to have a moderator for each panel. They're going to be KRTD Media hosts. And for one of them, we're also going to have one of our show hosts for the Hair of the Dog show that streams live on KRTD Media, Andy Kennedy. But yes, we are going to be focused on solutions. There are too many people talking about problems out there. I totally agree with you, Joe. And that's why we put this together. It's because there are too many people talking about problems and not enough people talking about how do we move forward. Now that Force the Vote has happened, and now that we know that, for example, the squad is not fighting the corporate Democratic leadership the way that we had hoped that they would. How do we respond, and how do we move forward doing that? How do you move forward running against uncorrupted against a campaign, against an incumbent who's entrenched and taking corporate money, and do so and be successful? Those are the type of things we're looking for solutions to.
Shane?
Absolutely. Let me ask you, which topic do you think is the most important, or do you think they're all extremely important? Where do you stand on that?
Every topic that we're talking about is important, and the truth is that we could have added twice the amount of topics, And everybody actually came to us and said, how come you're not doing X or not doing Y? And the answer is that we intend to do them all. We just can't all do it at once. So we are planning on having future US Solutions Summits for sure. They will likely be even larger than this one is as the inaugural. We weren't sure what we could put together. And the response has been overwhelming. It has been amazing. It has been thrilling. It has been exciting. And we're ready to have a terrific event tomorrow and blow the world away with what they're about to see.
Definitely. Now, where can people find out about Independent Left?
Well, we're everywhere on social media. We have a website called independentleft.news. It's a news aggregator website that pulls in articles and videos from YouTube and from all across the web. And it updates twice a day at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. That website is at independentleft.news. Again, that's independentleft.news, not .com, but .news. We're also on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram at IND Left News. And this event will be co-streamed, not just on the KRTD family of channels, but on the Independent Left family of channels, as well as on some of our panelists channels, like Hard Lens Media, like Frank Analysis, like Justin Jackson, The Takeover. They're also going to be co-streaming the event live as well to their YouTube channels.
Okay, Joe, do you have any more questions for Indy?
I don't think I have any questions. Okay, at this point, I would like to say, though, this is an extremely ambitious endeavor, and you're approaching it with a terrific amount of enthusiasm, Indy.
Well, again,
I'm really very personally excited about it.
Again, I appreciate that. And everybody's been an inspiration for this. I am a fan of all of these folks as much as everybody else is. We put together an event that we wanted to see ourselves as fans, that we thought everybody else would also want to see. And again, not just folks talking about the issues that are happening and the drama between streamers, but solutions about actual issues, about actual policies, and how do we move ourselves forward. I think that's so important in a conversation that's missing, but also bringing a group of folks together to have these conversations is also really important. And I'm excited. I'm inspired by the Force the Vote town hall that Jimmy had put together in January, was also inspired by the People's Party convention that had happened last year, the way they brought a bunch of people together and the excitement. If we can recapture even a portion of that energy and eclipse it, that would exceed our wildest expectations. And the idea, again, is to bring people together. That's all we want to do here, is bring people together.
Definitely. Thanks, Indy. Now let's get to our next interview.
Thank you.
Next, we have Howie Hawkins, the 2020 presidential nominee for the Green Party. Thanks for joining us today, Howie.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you're going to be speaking tomorrow at our presidential panel with Mark Charles and Christina Tobin, who I know you're familiar with yourself. So what are you most excited about for the summit? What are you most excited to talk about? There's a couple of issues there. What are you most excited about yourself?
Well, I think the exclusion of political minorities, like ethnic minorities, by our winner-take-all election system is something people have to face up to. It's political bigotry. You know, we are blamed by the spoiler problem in like presidential elections. If you go to legislative races and they're single member districts, one of the major parties is the majority, everybody else is excluded because the winner takes all. Even the members of a major party who are the minority in that district. And I think that's an issue that we have a chance to deal with now because ranked choice voting is gaining momentum. We went into the election in the fall with about 30 cities having it. Now we have over 50. We passed 5 in that election, plus the state of Alaska. And since that election, Austin, Texas, Burlington, Vermont, and 23 cities in Utah are going to use it this year. And there are campaigns in all 50 states. I think this is a game changer. So that's what I'm excited about. You know, having been called a spoiler many times, it's not me spoiling the election, it's the system that sets up spoilers.
Absolutely. Joe, do you have any questions for Howie?
Yes, I do. In terms of how fast things are moving with respect to ranked choice voting, I think you said there are campaigns in every state going on in support of ranked choice voting, correct?
Almost every state. I know of 45 last time I looked.
Where are the chances best for accomplishing ranked choice voting in the short run?
I think in the short run, at the municipal and county level, because to get a state legislature, I mean, our goal in New York is to have 500 people in each assembly district demanding it. It's going to take a while to build that kind of movement. I mean, we're smart enough to know we just can't go find a friendly legislator and put a bill in that's not even going to get out of committee. We got to have a movement so they have to pay attention to us. So that's going to take, a couple years in a lot of states, or even longer, but hopefully not longer, to move at state level.
Right. In your opinion, do you think that ranked choice voting should it be for both the primaries and the general? Because I believe that right now, New York City, the mayoral election, they're doing it in the primaries, but I don't know if they're doing it in the general election, and that's something I don't think that I'm aware of.
Yeah, they're not doing it in the general. That's when the Greens would run. So it's for the Democratic primary, but they didn't want competition from the Greens. They said it was a problem with the fusion ballot, which is nonsense. They had fusion on proportional ranked choice voting in New York City from 1937 to 1945, 5 council elections. We could have shown them how to do it. We could have given them the old ballots. So that was just an excuse. Yeah, we can't have partisan legislation for ranked choice voting. It just benefits the major parties. It has to be for everybody.
So it should be in the primaries, it should be in the general, it should be used all across throughout the entire election.
Yeah, for executive offices, those are inherently single seat. So it's called instant runoff voting. But even more important is for legislative. You got to have what they call single transferable vote in Europe. It's proportional ranked choice voting. So if you have a 9-member district, the winning threshold is 10% plus 1. So every party that gets over that 10% threshold gets a seat. And, if they get 30%, they get 3 seats. That way, everybody is included, all political viewpoints. Under winner take all, most of our districts are not competitive.
Yes.
Something like 95% of the congressional districts. Everybody knows we're going to win before the election even happens.
Mm-hmm.
With gerrymandering, the politicians pick their voters and they inherit seats. They don't earn them. So this is, I think, really crucial to opening up the political process to all political viewpoints.
Yes, I certainly agree. I wonder what made them successful in Maine in getting to ranked choice voting.
They had a governor elected 3 times in a row with less than 30% of the vote when they had plurality voting. And people got fed up. And, there was a campaign to get ranked choice voting, and people said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So they got it passed. The Republicans sued them in court. They won in court. They had to do a second referendum, but they won. And now they got it.
Definitely. And Howie, I want to ask you, you participated in, I believe, the 3 or 4 free and equal debates with Christina Tobin, and I think one of those was also with Mark Charles. What was your experience participating in those debates? And what did you get from that?
Well, we had 2 debates. Yeah, Mark was in the first one I was in.
Okay.
The second one, I don't know why he wasn't in. Maybe they had to have a certain number of ballot lines.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting because you had different points of view that you weren't hearing from Biden and Trump. And we didn't agree, but we were able to get our viewpoints across and give people alternatives to think about.
And how much time did you guys spend doing personal attacks on each other and interrupting every 5 minutes in your debate?
We didn't do any of that.
Oh.
We were asked questions, we answered the questions, presented our own point of view positively. I don't think there was some disagreements. I disagreed with people, but not disagreeably.
Right.
I wasn't going ad hominem, like Trump would, and then Biden fell into that in those debates. So,
So it was a real talk. It was a time to sit down and talk about the issues without having all this noise.
Yeah, that's right.
How do we get the major parties to do that, Howie?
To get behind open debates or ranked choice voting or both?
Well, to get behind both, but also just to stop all the ad hominems, okay, and the labeling, and the, all the nonsense that goes on in their particular debates when they should be talking about issues.
Well, I think that's inherent in a two-party system because it pays to go negative. You may get mud on your hands
Yes.
when you throw it, but you get mud all over your opponent. And they know, their pros know that negative ads, I think something like 90% of the ads in the presidential race were negative from the major party candidates. You get a multi-party system, particularly with ranked choice voting, so you don't have vote splitting problems, so that people who are close to each other split a vote, and the person who may be the least popular wins in a plurality. When you have that situation, you want the second and third choices of other candidates on their ballots, even if you're not their first choice. So you don't go around ad hominem attacking these other candidates. You just present your own program positively. So the incentives are very different in a multi-party democracy as opposed to a two-party duopoly.
And it's not impossible to have a multi-party system. I believe Canada has more than two parties in their parliament, and the UK also has more than two parties serving in their government.
Yes, and also France has a multi-party system. Germany has a multi-party system. All democracies have multi-party systems.
Most democracies are multi-party. You have one-party dictatorships, and we have a two-party dictatorship, which in some ways is slicker because both parties are funded by the corporate elites, and they give us the illusion of choice. And when it comes to neoliberal austerity domestically and imperialism abroad, they have bipartisan consensus for the most part. So the alternatives just don't get heard.
Definitely. I do want to ask you, one of the issues that is going to be brought up in your panel is First Nation issues. The United States always breaking treaties, and then also expecting the person who they have the treaty with to keep their word after they've already broken the treaty. Say, hey, you agreed to this, we're backing out, but you're still going to keep your word. And they do this with the Native Americans. They do this all across the world too. So
they do it all across the world, like with Iran.
Well,
we break the treaty with Iran, okay, and then we say, well, we're ready to come back, okay, and they say, well, it was you who broke the treaty, so you comply with the treaty first, and well, then we'll be willing to talk to you further. And we say,
every American should be concerned about breaking treaties because in the Constitution, they're at the level of constitutional law. And if we can't honor the treaty obligations, are they going to honor our constitutional rights? And we see them eroding with all the surveillance we have, with different treatment of people charged. You have in the National Defense Authorization Act a provision where they can snatch people they consider terrorists, like a journalist who may have interviewed somebody they consider a terrorist, and disappear them without the right of counsel, habeas corpus, none of that. So that should be a concern to all of us. And with respect to the treaties with indigenous nations, there have been court decisions saying, like the Onondaga Nation, which is adjacent to where I'm at in the city of Syracuse, they were told they came too late. And so their claim is moot. And well, the treaty didn't change, but I think we need congressional legislation to reopen, to say that you just can't say they're too late. There are good reasons why they came when they came, to get their land rights. So I think that's probably the most immediate thing we can do to try to move on the issue of honoring treaty rights.
Definitely. Let's Al, if you want to stay with us, we don't have a next interview. You want to stay with us for a few minutes as we look through the panel slides, because we don't have another interview for another few minutes.
Sure.
So let's let's go ahead and start showing the panel slides and how you'll stay with us as we look through this, and you can also give your thoughts on some of the other panels. So let's go ahead and do that.
So you want me to comment on panel 1 here?
Let me see if it's showing on stream. Okay, yes, it is. Yeah, what do you think about panel 1 here?
Well, I interviewed Aiden Hill. I've met him a couple times. We had him on our live stream that Angela Walker and I do. And, you know, he was a Green Party candidate for mayor of Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And good candidate. And the other topic is get money out of politics. I would rephrase that, get private money out of politics.
Mm.
Elections are public functions and they should be publicly funded. And I'm for full public campaign financing, not this matching fund system. With full public campaign financing, which was the demand of progressives in the 90s, we got it in Maine, we got it in Arizona. So each candidate that qualifies gets an equal grant to run their campaign. With the matching fund system, if it's a 1-to-1 match, the candidate who has $1 million and he gets or she gets 2 million, but the candidate who gets 2 million that can be matched ends up with 4 million. So the difference changes from 1 million to 2 million. It doubles the difference between the two candidates. And now in HR 1, they propose a 6-to-1 match, which increases 7-fold the difference between the candidate who has less money that can be matched with one who has more. So it actually increases the inequities in the campaign financing system. Plus, in that case, they now have no limits on the amount of public money or private money you can raise when you do get public funding. In the presidential public funding system that came out of the Watergate area, the 1974 Federal Election Campaign Act, if you accept private money, public money, matching funds in the primary, a general grant in the general election, you're limited on the public money, private money you can raise. So there's a limit in the primaries. If you accept that public grant in the general election after Labor Day, that's all you can use. And all the presidential candidates use that until Obama in 08. And since then, after he got out, they've all got out because the corporations are throwing so much money. It's a lot more than the public grant, which this year or 2020 was 102 million, I believe. But they were raising billions. So they just said, keep your public money. We're going to get the rich folks' money.
All right, let's take a look at panel 2.
Okay, Madeline, I know well. She's a New Jersey Green and now running for governor. She ran for Senate in 2020. Education, you know, the privatizers are really pushing hard. They had a friend in Betsy DeVos, and now they're taking it back to the state level. And there's been some, you know, reports in the press, I think are misleading. They say there's a big movement among people who are doing homeschooling, going to the charter schools. Actually, there's no evidence of that. What there is evidence of is the privatizers, these, you know, corporate interests are pushing really hard on state legislatures to put more public money into private schools, charters, which they call themselves public schools. That's because they get public money. That's like saying Lockheed Martin is a state-owned enterprise. No, they get contracts from the government. That doesn't make them public. Same thing with charter schools. So I think that's a huge issue right now.
Absolutely. So Sean, let's go to panel 3. I want to make sure we run through these. So.
Well, the one I've heard of is Shahid Buttar. Get money out of politics. I already talked about that. Congress, you know, people think the Greens only run for president. Actually, our emphasis is on legislative races, particularly local races. We're trying to build from the bottom up. But I think having good congressional candidates is more important than running for president. I mean, we have reasons for running for president. We get ballot lines, we get our issues out there, we recruit more members, but you can do that at the congressional level, except the ballot line issue. In a lot of states, the presidential vote determines whether you have a ballot line for the next election cycle, which determines whether you can get candidates on the ballot to run for Congress more easily.
Definitely. Now let's go to panel 4. Oh, there you are.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it.
Let's go to panel 5.
Direct action or electoral politics. I think you got to have both. I mean, if you're out there protesting, if you're not threatening the votes of the politicians, they can say, fine, jump up and down with those signs all you want. Now that's street protests. I mean, there are some forms of activity that have a lot of leverage, like strikes. We've seen that with the Palestinians in recent days. We see that in Colombia right now. That's really important. But by the same token, in the end, you don't want to let the politicians not feel threatened by the movement's ability to vote for their own candidates. So I think it's not an or, it's an and.
Definitely. And to the final panel, let's take a look at that.
Excuse me. Yeah, media reform is huge. We have a huge problem of a small number of giant corporations determining what the news is, how it's presented, and they have their biases. And so a lot of alternative voices are excluded. I mean, my presidential campaign, we were zeroed out. We were blanked out. And, you know.
And I actually saw they actually had you on MSNBC for 2 minutes, took you off, and then started attacking you after you were gone.
I knew they were going to do that. It was a setup because I know who they are. But you know what? That it was actually 3 minutes.
Oh,
just being on there 3 minutes, more people found out about me than all the social media and other things we were doing. So, you know, you got to kind of take a punch to, you know, get in the fight, I guess.
definitely. Yep. I think it's 6 companies now that own pretty much all the media, or 5 companies.
Yeah, 5 or 6. I've seen both figures, both numbers. Yeah, and they own something like 90% of all broadcast print, you know, measured by how many people see it. So it's a very small number of people determining what we see. And then the censorship question, you know, I don't miss Trump on Twitter, but by the same token, a private company determining who's got a platform and who doesn't is a problem. It's a free speech issue. So I think we need public media that's independent of the state. So you have like a public broadcasting system where the boards are selected by a lot from the people rather than elected or appointed by politicians, which is what we have now. So they really represent the people, but they are independent of the state. Because otherwise you got state media and it has its agenda. And, you know, we need that at the local level in particular, because journalism covering municipal county affairs is shrunk down to nothing. People don't know what's going on in City Hall or the county court. And so the politicians are cutting all kinds of deals and leaving the people out.
Definitely. Joe, I want to give you a couple minutes to ask some more questions to how we can converse a little bit before we move on to our next interview.
Okay, that'll be fine. The demonetization topic, you know, censorship / demonetization. I think what they want to focus on there, or will be focusing on there, is what the social media companies have been doing in order to demonetize the alternative voices. In other words, considerable followings, okay, were built up by people like Jimmy Dore, Fiorella, Graham Elwood, okay, and so on. And now the social media people are beginning to demonetize them. So they're not able to make a living, okay, on YouTube anymore, or on some of the other platforms. and they're beginning to suffer. It's hard for them to stay in business. And so this is an issue too. In other words, the monopoly platforms are beginning to deprive the business people who've gone into the news business to actually deprive them, okay, of their income. And they're beginning to threaten the very existence, okay, of these people. I think they're going to be talking about that too, and that's going to be a hot issue in this panel.
I'm not familiar with that issue. So what do? Just say you can't ask for supporting donations on your YouTube?
No, not exactly saying that, but what
So with
doing
YouTube, if you
is-
get to a certain level on YouTube, you get to over 1,000 subscribers and you have over 4,000 watch hours, people watching you consistently, then you can say, I want to monetize. And then YouTube will pay you for ads that they will run on your channel. What YouTube can do is they can say, we don't like what you're saying. We're going to pull that monetization support from you because we don't agree with you. And
right. What
now
they
you got to go get a
say
regular
is,
job. You can't do this.
Your content is not in line with our community standards. When they say it's not in line with our community standards, they demonetize you for that particular broadcast. So you no longer get your share, okay, of the ad revenue. And then they start doing that, and broadcast after broadcast, and they begin to actually censor the words of the people who are doing the live stream.
Okay, I get it.
They have to watch out for certain words because those words are picked up by the algorithms. So they're always inventing new ways of framing things to get around the algorithms.
Exactly. And then even if it's popular, sometimes they won't show your content. They will try to hide it. It really used to be what was trending on YouTube. You used to see videos from independent media. Now you see CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and all of them, even if they're not even at all popular with their videos.
Yeah.
They'll take out YouTube picks who they put in the trending now.
Well, I think that's an argument for either socializing these platforms that are
Yes.
monopolistic, because once they reach a critical mass, everybody wants to be on them because everybody's on them. That's where all the information is. That's where all the people are. Or antitrust. So you have alternatives and maybe some combination of that. I think you have to look at each platform that is beginning to determine who has access and who doesn't, which is like, having some cop in the public square deciding who gets to speak from the soapbox and who doesn't.
Right, except they're not cops, of course, or maybe I should say they're private cops. They're not public cops.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to go to commercial break, We're going to put up a slide and we will be back in a minute or two. All right, we're back, and this time we're with Aiden Hill, a former candidate for Berkeley mayor in California. Thanks for joining us, Aiden.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Joe, why don't you go first this time? Ask some questions.
Okay. Well, I was particularly interested in, by your background, in the Green New Deal kinds of concerns. And I wondered what you had in mind for Berkeley and for California more generally when it comes to implementing those parts of the Green New Deal that can be implemented at the local level and the state level.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So just a little bit about me. I'm the youngest mayoral candidate in Berkeley's history. I ran for office when I was 27, currently 27 now. Why I came to Berkeley is because I was involved at UC Berkeley under political science. So I've lived in California my entire life, and I chose UC Berkeley because of its commitment, at least theoretically, to free speech, progress, social activism. I'm a member of the Green Party, and so the commitment to the Green New Deal, as well as green values like local democracy, community-based economics, feminism, and environmental wisdom are all really important to me. I was also the first legally non-binary person to run for public office in the United States history, and so gender equity is also a really huge component of my campaigns. So when I ran for mayor, I focused really heavily on climate adaptation and mitigation strategies. I saw that the Paradise wildfires were happening, the floods in Sonoma County, and all the science had said that it was going to get worse and worse as time went on. So a lot of my campaign that's influenced by the Green New Deal is really focusing on making sure that we have infrastructure that can weather the storms of climate change, infrastructure that can lower sea level rise, really make sure that all of our businesses around here have renewable energy systems in place. Berkeley's most carbon emission comes from traffic. And so that's excess of cars in our atmosphere. And so one thing I wanted to do was look into wind turbines off of freeways, off of major intersections, see how we can carbon capture and transfer that. Another big thing is I wanted to make sure that Berkeley's economy and transportation system went 100% green by 2035. And I would want to do it by 2025. But the really big issue there is making sure that public transportation is accessible and available for everyone. Right now in Berkeley, most of our travel is based off of Lyft and Uber. And that is complicated because I want to respect the rights of workers and make sure that they have equal pay. However, if everyone is using these rideshare capacities and not working through public transportation, we lose a huge sector of revenue that we can implement for local governance needs. And another big thing is I wanted to make sure that community gardens was available in every single district in Berkeley to make sure that our resources are 100% organic and local farmed based by 2025. Obviously, we'll need a few more years to do that. However, it was really focused on eliminating carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, making sure we have that renewable economy set in place and focusing on a budget that prioritizes our infrastructure. Right now, we still have streets that haven't even been fixed in Berkeley, streets that were supposed to be fixed from 2018 that we still don't even have. And it makes everything more difficult for cyclists, people who are driving, people with disabilities and our elderly population. And so really making sure that there's institutions in place that can help them. That was a huge part of my campaign. So, yeah.
Second question. In running as a Green, okay, in Berkeley, what was the degree of disadvantage that you had financially compared to the other candidates? And how can we get around that kind of disadvantage?
Yeah, so if you don't run as a Democrat in Berkeley, you don't exist. They don't think that you are actually on the ballot, because what happens is most of these clubs and organizations, they're ran by members who are a part of the local Democratic clubs. So essentially, if you're a Democrat, you get access to all the endorsements. Even the California Nurses Association during a pandemic didn't even want to interview me because they were so focused on the Democratic Party, same as Sierra Club. And so how do we get around that? It has to be mass movement organizing. Green Party candidates rally around the issues that are present in their city. So for me, I'm in District 7, the University District of Berkeley. The main issue there of equity is People's Park. How do we make sure that we have a green space for our community instead of more high rises? And so me advocating on behalf of People's Park and students at the university and our needs at Telegraph Avenue, I made a huge impression on the people, but that didn't translate into voter power because the Democrats had all the money to make as many signs, banners, postcards to everyone in the district regardless. So how do we get around that? We need more people involved, more people that can see green candidates are farther left than Democrats. Right now, we're all worried about progressivism, and Biden is the standard of what a Democrat should be. But you have people running for office who are 100% pro-Palestine, 100% pro-Black Lives Matter and solidarity, and 100% workers cooperatives. And if only people saw us as a realistic choice, rather than just simply going with the status quo, I think a lot can be done really quickly. And it's that balancing act. Like, how long can you wait to get Medicare for all? Can you wait 4 more years when I get the chance to run again? Or do you want it now?
I've been waiting an awful long time.
Yeah,
And I want to
So
bring something up.
I've been waiting since the 1960s. My God.
Yeah, and as mayor, I felt like I had really strong proposals. I wanted to budget for universal access to mental health care and to public health care, and really develop a regional bulk purchasing system for insulin, for walkers and wheelchairs, and really focusing on preventative health. But the Democrats had a simple platform. We want to save Alta Bates Hospital, and that's really all they did. But somehow that was more appealing because it was more realistic, because that candidate had more money to win an election, rather than a candidate that's willing to actually budget what little money we have as a city towards making sure people get access to health. It blows my mind, but it's systemic.
You're in California. Unfortunately, Berkeley Democrats, get all the spotlight. But if I'm not mistaken, in 2020, there were 25 or 30 Greens that were actually elected in California. Some
Exactly.
mayors, some local leaders. Like it does happen in California.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
What
I would
makes
say that
Berkeley different is my question.
Yeah, Berkeley's different. It's a far, far Democrat state. There was an interesting parallel between Kamala Harris being from Berkeley and then people wanting to vote for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, simply because of that. Not everyone in Berkeley supported Bernie Sanders, for example, and Bernie Sanders just a little farther left than Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. The majority of people here, it's kind of like in the air, because you have people in the Berkeley Hills, for example, that were completely against affirmative action. Whereas many of those other places in California, it's people of color as the base demographic. And so things like affirmative action, things like community gardens, making sure we have a park, that's the difference, I think. And it's important to notice that Berkeley is heavily getting gentrified over the last 20 years. There have been more market rate housing, an increase in homelessness, the destabilization of our local store-bought mom and pop shops being here in Berkeley in favor of things like Skydeck and Microsoft and Apple. All of these large-scale companies have come into Berkeley, and now the median household income in order to get a house in Berkeley is a couple $1 million. And we know that people who have stable housing are the ones more likely to vote because they don't have to change their address. They don't have to get extra ID cards or prove their residence.
Now let's take a look at your panel. Let's bring that up on the screen.
That's panel 1.
It's panel one. Let's take a look at panel one.
There it is.
There it is. So
Great
you're going to
photo.
be on panel with Nathan Klein from who ran for State Senate District 7 in Missouri, and then Carrie Barber from the Hair of the Dog Show. And you got the topics of third-party candidates and get money out of politics. Now, let's get some of your initial thoughts, on that. But don't give too much away because we want something there still for the panel.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with, always giving more information. So initial thoughts on third-party candidates. If we had a true democracy, it wouldn't be an issue. People could run on whatever banner, whatever coalition they wanted to. However, we have this bipartisan system where Republicans are the bad guys, essentially, in California, and Democrats are the ones that are trying to protect all of our rights. But the reality is it's much more nuanced. There are people out there with different opinions, with stronger opinions on protecting people and the planet and preserving peace. But they're not represented by the media. And the reason why is because they're not a Democrat. And if they're not a Democrat, they don't get access to Democratic money. And so those with the most money, who are probably more towards the center, probably has this large business, probably someone who is in agriculture or in the wine industry, they get to give as much money as legally possible. In Berkeley, it's a $250 contribution, whereas we don't have those people on our side. We have the poor, we have people who are homeless, people who don't have housing or are trying to make housing payments. And so we don't get as much money as these people because the people we know don't have as much money as those people. And so just to put it short, third-party candidates, it's really hard for us because we don't have access to the same capital, the same income. And that means we don't have access to the same publicity. And if they don't stop us from showing up to an interview by blocking us, they'll make sure that that interview is pushed down and they'll find their own advocacy. It's hard. It's rough being green.
Definitely.
Okay, so we have the more general problem of getting money out of politics. And of course, we wondered what some of your ideas on that subject were.
Yeah, government accountability is a really big thing. My personal opinion, I think every single candidate should have access to public money. And for every infraction that you do, you lose money in the process. And so simply by just having a collective, for lack of a better word, pot, where every candidate pulls from, it makes things much more fair and even and gives a stable playing ground for anyone, regardless of your income or if you're working or not, to access being a part of democratic governance. People tend to think that politicians are bad because of the way things are set up. But when I run for politics, I'm doing a civil service. I'm one of many people in my community who want to define how we move forward into the future. But so long as people like me are put in the same category as people like Gavin Newsom or Nancy Pelosi, who will win regardless of whether they even show up to your meeting or not, I think that does a disservice to all of us. And so I think if all of us were on a stable ground, we all had access to media, we had the same amount of money to make signs or whatever, and people can truly choose who they want and what vision they want to represent them, it would be better for everyone, but we don't have that system yet.
Right, it certainly would be better, but if everybody were drawing from the same pool, and the pool, say for a local election were $2 million, or something like that, wouldn't it still be possible for Gavin Newsom to take his share of the $2 million and then put in another $8 million of his own money in order to be elected? Okay.
Yeah, that's the problem.
We stop that. Can we stop that? How can we stop that?
I don't know if we can stop it at the local level. I know Berkeley has its own election guidelines that prevents those large sums of money from coming in. So it's a little better because in Berkeley, the maximum contribution any person can give is $250. You can't get any money from a PAC. It has to be from individuals, and it has a public financing department where any candidate who gets 30 people at $50 each gets to have extra money from the city. So we can stop that type of action happening locally. But when it comes to California as a whole, those congressional districts, it's really difficult because the ones who are in power to make those decisions benefit from the system that is at play right now. The only other way to do it is through a ballot initiative or a proposition that Californians can vote upon. But that's a very difficult task to do because you need so many signatures, you need money to canvas for those signatures, and still it might not even pass depending on how the opposition throws its money around. So it's really hard to say what can happen, but I do know that local offices, they have more power to actually determine campaign finance laws.
Good.
Definitely. Now we're gonna have to go to commercial kind of, and let's go ahead and put up the card.
Okay, so thank you for coming, Aiden.
Back there.
Yeah, thank you. Very good questions. I appreciate that.
All right, everybody, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. We have Jeff Carr with us now, who is the former Education Commissioner for New Mexico, former Mayor Pro Tem of Eagle Nest, New Mexico, former history teacher, right?
Yes.
And former candidate for Lieutenant Governor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm
So,
old.
Jeff, thanks for coming on today.
Okay.
So why don't we start with your panel? So your panel topic is how do we fix education? Now you were an educator for a number of years, right? And you worked in the education as the education commissioner. So what are some of the? So I don't want to go too deep into it, but what are two of the main issues that you saw there when you were in these positions?
Two of the main issues I saw were, oh gosh, it was important. You know, it's always, always funding, and we always had the other side saying that, say, oh, you can't fix it by throwing money at it, the conservative side, that type of thing. It's always been an issue, and the other issue was was class size, and you have a lower teacher pupil ratio, you're going to, it's going to cost more money, right? And but then they come out, the conservative people always come out and say, oh, class size doesn't matter, class size doesn't matter. But if you look at all the private schools, they have really small class sizes. Works really well for them, but not for regular people like us. But it's, I guess those two main issues I look at, and there's so many, and it's so complicated. What some people would consider not an education issue would be poverty, and poverty is the key indicator when it comes to saying what a child's outcome is going to be in education. And a lot of people won't equate that. They go, oh, no excuses, right? But there are, and that's a overriding issue that a lot of people don't want to talk about.
Joe, you want to go first with some questions?
Yeah, I guess my questions would relate to what kinds of competition from private schools are you getting in your state? Are the private schools taking public money that would otherwise go to public schools?
Yeah, you're probably referring to charter schools mainly.
Yes, I am referring to charter schools.
Matter of fact, there was a religious school in not too far from where I live that actually, and they ran out of money. They were a private school they were Methodist, and they changed everything. They took the religion stuff out and everything, and we made them a charter school. But yeah, the charter schools are a big thing, and what you're getting, that's a huge, they like to say, well, we're public schools. Well, yeah, you're publicly funded, but you're privately operated because they have privately appointed boards and all those issues. And what we see is de facto segregation in those schools, meaning that, oh, we can't say we only accept certain people, but what we found in reality was they were extremely picky, and any kids of color, Native Americans, they would use some excuse to expel them and get rid of them for some way. So a lot of the schools are predominantly higher income people and white people, and so that's another huge issue, and that's nationwide. We don't allow not-for-profit, but they get around it by setting up these shell nonprofit corporations, to make a profit. For instance, Pearson's involved, K-12 Inc. Both of those organizations are for profit, and they sell software, and they make a lot of money off of these schools, and they do very poorly.
So they drain the public money out of those schools through the software or other products that they sell.
Yes,
And then they basically take the profit
right.
in that way.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
nonprofit schools are actually profit-making schools for the private vendors who sell
Yeah.
to them.
It's like, you know, that's the deal. You privatize everything. Education, I called it in one of the public meetings on record, the education industrial complex.
Yeah.
And it's all, you know, that's the neoliberal conservative bent to
Yeah.
to sponsor all this, and the end game is to get rid of public education altogether.
Yes. How much of a cut of the state budget would you say they get?
I used to know that off the top of my head. Um, you know, it's probably less than 20%. You know, but you know,
That's a very
that's a lot.
sizable amount, though.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for us, you know. And you know, we're a poor state in New Mexico. You know, we're maybe a little richer than West Virginia, but not much. You know, and the only reason we got as much money for education as we do is because of the land grant money that we've got in a permanent fund. And we've got a permanent fund that nobody wants to touch that's worth billions of dollars. And we are grabbing some of those dollars for early childhood education, but we're better off in some states because of that. But if we didn't have that, it would really be much worse than it is. And New Mexico is doing a lot of things better than you know, not in education, but they are on top of some other things, and they are doing some things that are better than other states. But we do have a decent. The governor is pretty decent. She's still neoliberal, but she's pretty decent, and she's done some good things. She's handled the pandemic pretty darn well. So I have to give her credit for the things that she's done right. You know, much better than the governor we had before.
Right. The thing I wanted to ask you is, before this entire event, a couple of weeks ago, we actually did a preliminary. You, Steph, and Madeline actually sat down well before the panel and got to talk a little bit. What did you gain from that, and what do you think that, you know, do you think you came up with some ideas, and how do you think that'll play out at the summit now that you've already?
Yeah, you know, it was good, and it's good to get to talk to the people before you're, you know, before you're actually just thrown together, you know, and so you can get together to know each other a little bit better. As Steph, I've seen her on video a lot. Madeline, I've seen her a few times. Probably neither one of them have ever seen me before anywhere, but it's yeah, we got some good ideas and got my mind to thinking about. And you know, now one of the things I came up with, well, solutions. What are the solutions? You know, and I think that's important. And if you look at quite simply, again, I'm going to list some or say or mention private schools, high class private schools, and we don't really have. New York City's got some really expensive private schools that make our best private schools look ghetto, you know, but it's that's we look at that, what works for them, you know. Of course, another reason things work for them is because they're in a higher social economic group. There's not people in poverty unless they bring a few people in on scholarship or something like that, but quite typically you've got a very sophisticated group of children in the expensive private school. And how do we get there? So there's a lot of things to go with that as well. You know, we can help balance that out with social workers, psychologists, counselors, things like that. There's lots of things that we can do. You know, like Head Start. Head Start was meant to help that sort of thing as well. Yeah, great. You know, it's always good to have. It was good to meet them, and really happy to be on with these two. Considered an honor. It's nice to meet you, Joe. I don't think we haven't talked, have we?
No, we've never had a chance to talk
I think so.
first. How do you see the federal government, okay, is helping?
In terms of education, the federal government.
In terms of education in the New Mexico, how can the federal government help New Mexico?
Yeah. Again, the federal land grant program it was freaking huge, and they did all the land grant colleges. University of Missouri, I believe, was the first one. New Mexico State is University of LSU, all those state colleges. So that's huge. Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. Most people don't know there's anything past Title I, if they know that. Those are all federal programs that have been extremely helpful to us over the years that mainly go to poor school districts. And we need much more of that. And we need the federal government to step in to equalize things. The whole scheme of keeping the federal government out of education, and is maybe it seemed like a good idea at the time, and worked for a while. But the federal government really needs to be much more involved. And a good, for instance, is what they did in Texas. And the school board threw out that 1619 project. I think it came out of New York City, that was talking about all the discrimination and things in history. And the conservatives, of course, always say we're brainwashing the children,
Yeah,
our socialist communist ideas,
yeah, well,
yeah.
we always have to cope with those things.
Yeah, it's really quite funny.
We're having a hard time hearing you, Jeff.
What?
We're having a hard time hearing you now.
You having a hard time hearing me now?
Oh, now we can hear you.
I was probably covering up the microphone and not knowing I was doing it. I forgot what I was saying now, but it was if you give children all the information, I come up there and say, hey, the Republicans think this, Democrats think this, Libertarians think this, Green Party thinks this. And if you give the kids all the information, most of the time they're going to come up with their own conclusions that are
Now,
probably
do you think
different than their conservative parents.
in schools, should schools say, hey, we have the Democrats and the Republicans and that's it? Or do you think they should say, we got the Democrats, we got the Republicans, we have the Greens, the Libertarians, we have this, and this. This is what all of them think.
Yes.
And here's all 25 parties in the United States, and here's what they think.
Right. Yes. And that's important, and that's how I always taught. And I used to get in trouble from both sides.
So if you were to teach your students, Ralph, if you were to say to students, Ralph Nader ran in 1990, or Ross Perot made it into the debates, would your supervisor say, hey, you shouldn't be talking about that? That's not important to history.
If I had taught anywhere other than Taos, quite honestly, most of the places I taught, were pretty good about that type of thing. But Rio Rancho, really conservative suburb of Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
The administrators there have gotten on to teachers and even fired teachers for making any kind of political statement, even if it was just informing them of what's going on.
Hey, yeah, like if you said, hey, Joe Jorgensen came in third this election cycle, they'd say, you can't say that.
You don't mention anybody that a Democrat or a Republican, the two main cults in our country, right? And I was part of that cult. I think you were too. Maybe, I don't know. I know I was. Joe probably was. And I'm not gonna look, because I can't look down on people who are part of that cult, because I was, for a long time and too long.
Definitely.
We have to come up with some new ideas about, I think about it. how the federal government can help.
Yes.
There's a program that's been getting some attention in politics, okay, of late. It's the federal job guarantee program. Okay, and the idea is that the government guarantee a job offer to anybody who wants a full-time job anywhere in the United States. Okay, and the federal government will pay for the cost of the job.
Yes.
However, in these programs, local stakeholders would actually decide on what the jobs were going to be. So that's a way of continuing to have local control, but still get the federal money that's needed to do good things on a local level. Could a model like that be applied to education as well?
Boy, you know, part of the problem with education is local control, and part of the problem is not enough. I mean, you know, the problem is the school board system that we have nationwide is antiquated.
Yes.
And all the people, no other profession has non-professionals telling them what to do, or even changing the curriculum. The school board shouldn't have anything to do with curriculum, especially because they're not professional. Every once in a while, a teacher will end up on there, or a former administrator, but you know, for the most part, that whole structure needs to change. And you're talking about local control, and there has to be strict guidelines on what that local control is. Like, oh, we're going to have a Baptist prayer every morning in our school, and or we're going to have whatever. You know, there's certain guidelines, and you know, we know offhand, well, that's unconstitutional. But most people, a lot of people don't see it. They don't. Oh no, it's not. You know, we took God out of the schools. That's why we're such a mess. People say that. You know, so a lot of the local people, and that same thing where I live, the conservatives have completely taken over my local school board. You know, one of the things guys got elected, he says, I want to bring prayer back to school. He's an idiot, you know, I mean, but that's the problem with the local control part. There has to be really strict guidelines when it comes down to this. And we need educators to be in charge. And we need, and we have so many issues in education. It's so multi-layered and multifaceted. You know, our administrators are all pretty bad as well. And I don't want an administrator. I want a classroom teachers sitting on committees, sitting on boards, making decisions, and getting people to buy in from the bottom up. We have to do it that way. The federal jobs program thing idea about applying that to education, yeah, with certain guidelines, you know, strict guidelines, you know, where they can't just try to do whatever they want to do, you know,
Yeah.
that type of thing. So regulation has to be some regulation.
Yes. I see that.
Definitely. Now, we'll be right back with our next guest. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, man. We'll see you tomorrow.
It was great to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Joe. Mhm.
All right, and we're back this time with Madeline Hoffman, who our last panelist who we just talked to done a lot. Madeline has run for Senate twice, run for governor once before, and is doing it again now. Ran with Ralph Nader in the 90s, former head of New Jersey Peace Action. And am I missing anything, Madeline?
I was the director of a grassroots environmental organization also from 1983 to 1998, give or take. And I've also been sort of a peace emissary, person to person peacemaker to a number of countries around the world, specifically countries that the United States has targeted for war in most cases, or is targeting for war or has, including Hiroshima and Nagasaki on the 70th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bombs there. So that's another part of my background. But otherwise you got it just right, Shane. You got everything in that needed to be said.
Definitely. So, Joe, why don't you start off with the first question?
Okay, well, I guess our questions here should probably focus on the fixing education. So what kind of focus will you be taking tomorrow, Madeline?
Tomorrow, I will be talking about why I'm an educator. The role as an educator is something that I came to in the late 90s after I had run for political office. It wasn't my intention. I was always an activist and an organizer, concerned about government not working properly or working properly. But I was asked by a professor in 1997 or 98, I think 98, after I had run for governor, if I had a master's in political science or related field, and I had a master's in public administration. So we said, okay, we're going to hire you to be a professor of political science. And he taught me a lot. He was kind of a mentor for me as far as educating in a more radical way, not simply standing up in the front of a room and pontificating about this and that as a lecturer, but ways to involve students in thinking about the place that they live, thinking about participating in political discussions in the place where they live. And that's always been my philosophy, that a lot of people in this country don't know very much about how this government, the US government, is structured. And so if they don't know how it's structured, all they hear is the yelling and screaming between the Democrats and the Republicans, and they say, I don't want anything to do with it. And they turn off of politics altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, the government's making decisions that affect their lives day in and day out. So my philosophy has always been to help students find their political voices, so that they can at least speak up about things that matter to them and have that confidence that their opinion matters, even if they can't change all the decisions or influence them all. At least they have a fighting chance if they understand how the process works. And I've been teaching now since 1997, and it's a second career for me. It's all college. It was started with some environmental science, some political science, and now I teach public speaking primarily to English as second language students. And again, the idea is to empower students in a variety of different ways. And it keeps me in touch with what people are thinking. Sometimes, if you're as a politician or somebody running for political office within the Green Party or any other party, you get lost in that world, and you think everybody else thinks that way, and clearly they don't. you know, and so it's really important for me to continue to teach and to meet people. The ESL program or ESL students I meet are from all over the world, and that it helps to satisfy my curiosity about different places, different cultures. And then I learn from my students all the time. I'm not just teaching. I don't, it's a two-way, it's a back and forth kind of thing. Um, I I keep my mind open and I want to hear from students about what their experiences have been, what their countries are like if they come from if they come from Latin America or the Middle East or Asia or wherever.
Definitely. And you're right now you're an adjunct professor, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about how do you get tenure if you're an adjunct professor? Can you actually get it, or do they not want you to have it?
I don't think you can get tenure as an adjunct professor. I had a chance back in the late 90s because the man who groomed me or trained me, he was very ill with cancer, and he died about a year and a half after he hired me. And he wanted me to be, the director of the department. I have a master's degree, not a PhD,
Mm,
but I had at that point already maybe 40, almost, well, 30 years or 25 years plus of hands-on political experience in the state of New Jersey. And I was part of a process to be hired as a director of the department and to become tenured. But I had competition. I had a PhD from Colorado who
mm,
applied. He knew nothing about New Jersey politics, nothing, but he had a PhD at the end of his name. And
Yes.
so they hired him, and they said to me, well, thank you, but no thank you. And it took me a few months to get over that disappointment because I didn't understand and this was not an Ivy League school. This was not a little Ivy League school. This was a community college, which was a very good community college. But you'd think, at a community college level, the idea is to engage students and get them to become
Yeah.
more active members of the community. So if you had 20 plus years of experience with politics in New Jersey, that would be more attractive than just a PhD from somebody from out of state, but it didn't happen.
As someone who is a PhD,
Mhm.
I have no hesitation in telling you that 20 to 25 years of experience in the politics of one of our states is worth a lot more than one PhD. A lot more.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish I had heard that back in 1998, but I thought that then.
I'm sure you did.
But
You were quite right.
but the administration, well, let me back up too. The person who groomed me and trained me was a radical teacher. He had no qualms about saying he was a radical teacher or a radical educator. And I think some of the people in that administration at that time didn't like him because he had this radical perspective. And if I was being groomed by him, they automatically didn't like me either.
Yes.
But honestly, I really appreciate hearing what you just said. Because I mean, you want hands-on experience, unless well, anyway, you said it, I don't have to repeat it, but I
And I want to
appreciate
ask
hearing
you,
what you said. Mhm.
now this is probably something you haven't been asked in a while. You've been running for like 40, 50, whatever it is, and was your first time running, was that with Ralph Nader, or did you run prior to that?
No, my first time running was in 1996 with Ralph Nader.
How did you
So,
get picked for that?
well, it came out of the blue, in all honesty. I had a post office box I was working on environmental issues, toxic chemical pollution type environmental issues. I was working with communities and citizens groups facing pollution in their neighborhoods. And I went to my post office box one afternoon, opened it up, pulled out a letter, and the letter said, "Dear Madeline, you know, Ralph Nader is going to be running for president, but the national elections are really a series of state by state elections, and we're not sure if he's going to be running in New Jersey. So we're asking you if you would hold the ballot line for him in New Jersey, and if you would run for president." And as soon as I picked myself up off the floor, I said, "Me run for president?" And I just, I didn't know what to make of it. And I was talking to people, and I hadn't made up my mind. About 2 weeks later, when I went back to the mailbox, opened it up, and there was another letter in there, and it said, "Dear Madeline," and that letter was from the Green Party of New Jersey, by the way. This one was also from the Green Party of New Jersey, and it said, "Dear Madeline, thank you very much for considering to run for president, but we don't need you to do that because Ralph Nader has agreed to run in New Jersey." And so I said to myself, easy come, easy go, right? One minute I'm asked to run for president, the next minute I'm not needed. And as I read further, it said, "But he'll run, but we would like to invite you to be our favorite daughter candidate, to be his vice presidential running mate for New Jersey." And I asked my board, the board of my nonprofit at the time, the environmental group, Grassroots Environmental Organization, I asked them what they thought. And obviously, running with Ralph Nader was an honor that we didn't want to turn down.
Sure.
And so after some conversation with the board of directors, we decided that I would run, and I would step aside for a short period of time, because you can't be in a nonprofit and be partisan at the same time. So I stepped off the board, or not the board, but off the staff. I wasn't paid for that short period of time, those 2 or 3 months. But that experience, I was so energized by it that the next year when people asked me if I wanted to run for governor in New Jersey, I just said, "Of course, sure, I'll do that."
And when you ran for governor, did Ralph Nader endorse you that year?
He didn't endorse. He's not a kind of guy who endorses, but he did speak well of me, and said he was. I don't remember the exact words he used, but he didn't back Christy Todd Whitman. He didn't back Jim McGreevey. He didn't say kind words about either of them. So the kind words for me were as close to an endorsement as I was going to get. Yeah, it was quite a time, and I have things in my head from that time. I'll never forget what he said about politics at that moment. And a lot of what he said, they influence my teaching, the way I approach a student, and it also influences my politics and the way I look at the two-party, quote unquote, two-party system, the duopoly or the one party with two corporate heads, as he would call it. And so, yeah, it's been a long, from 2000 to 2018, for almost 20 years, I was out of politics, out of partisan politics altogether. I was the director of the nonprofit peace organization, and they didn't want me anywhere near the Green Party, nowhere near it. So I backed off for 18 years, and I thought I was out of politics until 2018. And so here I am. 2018, I ran for US Senate. 2020, I ran for US Senate. And now I'm running for governor because, well, we did really well in 2020, and we want to build off that.
Oh.
It's about building a movement. It's not about my own personal political career.
Joe, do you have any questions following all of that?
Yes, I guess I do have questions, and the questions are more
Okay.
about what would you do to fix education in New Jersey?
That's a big, big question, but I would move us away from the charter school and back to public school, public schools. I mean, one of my opponents, Cory Booker, when I ran for Senate in 2020, when he was mayor of Newark, he moved uh, away from public schools to charter schools. I would, for Newark, but I would want to make that a statewide deal, that the public schools need to be improved. The funding for public schools can't be dependent on property taxes, because people are going to squawk about seeing their taxes being used to subsidize schools in a less affluent neighborhood, for example. So I would call for either more corporate taxes, or a wealth tax on the 0.01%, and deep cuts in the military budget. I know that's a federal issue, but as governor, I could speak out for that, because
Sure.
if we cut the military budget by half, we have $370 billion freed up. I mean, right now, our federal tax dollars, 6 cents on every dollar goes to education, while almost 60 cents goes to the military. So we have to reprioritize education. We have to cancel student debt. We have to make college tuition free. We have to equalize educational opportunities, but take the burden of that off the back of property owners. No, so it's not the property tax that funds it. It's money coming from other sources. And then there's standardized testing that has shifted education away from education and toward teaching to a test. I feel we'd have to roll that back. And we make education about learning. I'm still a student. I'm a student of a lot of things, and I'm in my 60s, but so I think that idea of learning from each other and learning from the community, I think that has to be put back into education. I would change the voting age to 16. And by doing that, people say to me, well, why would you do that? People aren't old enough. They don't know. Yes, they are. At 16, a lot of 16-year-olds are very wise. And I remember when my parents were alive, they talked about civics classes when they were going to school in the 30s and in the 30s and maybe the 40s, but mostly the 30s. If people at the age of 16 were going to vote, then high schools, middle schools, the curriculum would have to shift in order to prepare students
They would get
for that.
educated in civics.
Exactly. Not as Ralph Nader said, and this was back in 96, he said, our kids are growing up corporate, not civic.
Yes.
So they know what Nike is, they know what, I don't know what some of the celebrities are. Beavis and Butthead, that's dating me, that's a long time ago. But they know those symbols, but they don't know who's the mayor of their town. Or that they might know in 10 minutes of studying, they might know more than the council members who are entrusted with making decisions for the town. So, I mean, those are a few of the things I would change,
Okay.
so that education more relevant, more meaningful, and engages students in the world around them. That's what has to happen, I think.
Okay. Since the federal government is the currency issuer and not the currency user, state governments are, okay, and businesses are, and we are, shouldn't the federal government be funding education even at the state
Yes.
level and local level?
yes, in some ways, the dollars would be there. Or, if it's tuition free, for example, tuition free college. I've taught at community colleges almost all of my college career. And I had a student in one of my classes walk into the classroom and say she had no interest in political science. I was teaching American government at that time. Halfway through the semester, she was so excited, making all kinds of connections, learning about political science and understanding it. And then just before the end of the semester, she said, "I'm so sorry, Professor Hoffman, but I can't afford to keep going here." And that crushed me, because she went from somebody who said she had no interest to somebody who did. And then she was blocked from continuing to follow what had started to become a passion for her. And I used to talk about how if the federal government gave more money to the states for education, the states could give more money to the counties. And this was a county college. So if the counties got more money to fund their county colleges, then the tuition would be lower.
Of course, but also the federal government could just create a revenue sharing program
True.
that was based, on need, with a number of variables defining the need, including, of course, the population size for the various states, or areas, but also need but could be related to housing indicators, and to poverty indicators, of various kinds, and that
True.
affect the splitting up of the federal funds. Of course. We used to have the revenue sharing programs that were quite important back in the 1960s and 1970s. And then the Republicans, and the neoliberals began to get away from them over
Yes.
the years. And now we have hardly any revenue sharing programs left.
And it's to our detriment.
To our-
So many people who are blocked from getting the kind of education that they want and deserve. And we're losing a gold mine there. We're losing a lot of really smart, creative people. We're losing their input into where we're headed. And I think that's a big problem, definitely.
Yes, it's part of losing our democracy, isn't it?
Good point. Good point.
And we'll be right back with our next guest. Thanks for coming on, Madeline.
But thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Madeline. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, and thank you for all your thought-provoking questions.
Oh, well, thank you for your thought-provoking answers.
All right. We'll see you at the summit tomorrow.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, and we're back with Joe Evans, former Libertarian candidate for Idaho's first congressional district, one of the hosts on KRTD News, Fourth Fridays, and combat veteran. So Joe is going to be hosting panel 1 with Carrie Barber from Hair of the Dog, Nathan Klein, and Aiden Hill. So the topics here are going to be third-party candidates and get money out of politics. So Joe, you're going to be moderating this panel. Joe?
Yes.
Your camera is off, Joe. Oh.
Sorry about that.
So you're going to be moderating this panel. What kinds of, this is going to be a short discussion, 25 minutes. So where do you intend to lead the conversation? What do you want the panelists to be able to cover in that short time?
Well, it's one of those things. We're going to be covering money in politics through a couple different discussions over the day. So what I want to take a look at first is what causes the problem? What are the problems that are the current result of money in politics? Where are we dealing with corporate interests, with lobbying interests, with the political action committees? How are they currently affecting the political landscape here in the United States and even in individual states? As you look at the difference between the blue states versus the red states, how is that money contributing to the problems with the political landscape?
So is it going to be your focus, Joe? Okay, my name is Joe too. I'm Joe. Okay, so is your focus going to be on the problems and how the problems impact, okay, the political system, okay, in general? Okay, and is it your hope that the people in panel 3 will focus on the solutions, or primarily on the solutions?
I mean, that's the logical progression. You start by identifying what the problem is. Then from identifying the problem, you move into the options, the ways to work through the system, and then finally what you're looking at is the end result. What are the solutions you're actually going to implement? Because like in panel 1, which is going to be my discussion, we could be looking at how does corporate interests influence either the national or even the state level. You see corporate interests,
even the local level.
Even the local level.
Yeah.
But you see a different kind of influence at each of the levels. Local level, you're usually seeing real estate development that influences city.
Yeah.
As you start looking at state level, you're looking at state level industries or even national industries, such as what ALEC has done across the United States, trying to create uniformity in state codes as far as corporate interests go. You also take a look at what big tech has done in California, what big ag has done in a number of different states, the way big oil has taken over North Dakota. You take a look at those state influences. And then again, you take a look at how the national level, you have all of these influences that are currently injected into the scene, trying to influence nationally how those bigger scenes affect even downstream, because we all know nothing happens at the state level without approval from national level. So you start building, you start taking a look at what's happening at the state level to create consistency across the states in order to justify a consistent rule coming through Congress. And you start looking at all of these big organizations. Take, for instance, right now, one of my big issues is marijuana legalization in the state of Idaho. We're one of 2 or 3 states where it is still illegal for even medical use here. Technically, even CBD with any THC content above 0.03% is illegal in this state. So we start taking a look at what industries, what organizations have been resisting that, and not just in Idaho, but across the nation.
Yeah.
So you start looking at Idaho. One of our senators is actually on the Senate Banking Committee. As a result, he's been able to influence the fact that marijuana dispensaries have not been able to use the national banking system in order to work there. And
Oh, wow.
right, that's the power that Idaho, this little 4-person delegation to Congress, has been able to have. And a lot of that is because this national money comes into Idaho and guarantees that this individual who sits on the Senate Banking Committee continues to sit on the Senate Banking Committee.
Oh, wow.
You know, but this is some of the problems that we look at. So what I want to focus on in the first 25 minutes is how has money in politics continued to contribute to the current issues? You know, and that'll give individuals in the second and the third to actually take a look at, you know, what different ways, how can you approach it, you know, at the state level, at the national level, and even the local level, again, where we're working with developers in city level government.
Definitely. It would be panel 3 where this issue is brought up again. So by the time
Yes.
we get from panel 1 to panel 3, you're hoping that some of the problems will be identified, which will help panel 3 facilitate some solutions in their longer time period.
Yes.
So who's going to be the moderator of panel 3?
The moderator in panel 3 is Andy Kennedy.
Andy Kennedy. So probably Andy Kennedy and Joe Evans should be doing a little talking maybe about how to facilitate the flow between what comes out of panel 1 and what goes into panel and what comes out of panel 3.
Oh, definitely. So
that
yeah.
might be a good idea.
Joe, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about we kind of did that with Madeline and we did it with a couple of people, so we get a little bit of background on yourself so people can get to know you as a moderator a little bit.
So me as a moderator, I used to be a signals intelligence analyst for the United States Army. And in that role, I was deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq a total of 4 times.
Okay.
And gave me an awful lot of experience with regards to foreign policy, in particularly how U.S. aid facilitated economic development or didn't, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan over my 4 different deployments. In addition to that, after coming back, I got involved in peace activism, a number of different organizations, got involved with the Green Party for the Jill Stein cycle after Bernie lost out to Hillary Clinton for the 2016 run. And following that, around 2018, because of the lack of a Green Party presence in the state of Idaho, I got involved with the peace activism and libertarian organizations here in the state of Idaho and actually ran as a libertarian candidate in 2018 for a state seat and ran again in 2020 for first congressional district. In that time, I've been able to take a look at the libertarian platform and become fairly familiar with it, and identified an awful lot with a lot of the concepts of decentralization of government, the reduction of power in the federal center in Washington, D.C., and being able to return a certain amount of control, not just to the state governments, but actually clear down to the local governments, where we allow cities and municipalities to have greater influence over their community development. And that's been my big message for going on about 4 years now.
But that's also a very big thing for Green Party people, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why it made the transition into running for a congressional seat from being a Green into the Libertarian, is because the left Libertarian and the right Libertarian basically have a lot of very similar principles when it comes to federalization, as in, don't do it. Both the Green Party and the Libertarian Party believe in the decentralization and allowing individual communities control over what goes on. Now, where you start running into the difference of opinion between left and right libertarian, or the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, comes down to once you're at the municipal level. How do you organize the collective or the non-collective in order to maintain the communication? If you run true libertarian, true center libertarian, ultimately you don't care. Each community is allowed to develop its own economic system, its own social care system, its own manner of communication, in a lot of ways, its own culture. As long as they are, the libertarians like to use the non-aggression pact, the NAP, non-aggression principle. And then as long as you do what you want to do over there and don't interfere with the way we do things over here, we can continue to cooperate and agree. Which is ultimately what we all want.
For example, let's say California wants, California wants to do a universal healthcare system, and then Idaho wants to do a different healthcare system, and then
correct.
All the states say, hey, I want to do this one, I want to do this one, I want to do this one, and I want to do this one.
And that's one of those things that's actually interesting, because as you start to take a look, you have the left that likes universal health care. You have the right that says, let's just deconstruct our current healthcare system and decentralize it and allow the individual doctors to come in and charge their own prices. Allow the market to decide, create a free market healthcare system without the influence of government and so on. And when you start looking at certain mutualist practices, somewhere in between, the idea says, great, let's all try our own experiment. Okay, you can do universal health care over there, you can do the free market health care over there, and let's see which one creates the greatest success for the community. And then from there we can look and say, it's working for California, let's go ahead and adopt it in Idaho. Or we look at Idaho and go, you know what, the free market's actually doing a better job than what California is doing with universal health care. Maybe free market's the way California should go. But this allows us to do the mutual aid and support, because as we go through, not all the experiments are going to be successful. Some will be more successful than we anticipated. But the idea is decentralized so that each community can help contribute to the best of class and the best of lessons learned, without this federal oversight that's creating this mishmash of things that just don't work for anybody.
Look, I don't think it's really the purpose, of this discussion to go into.
No.
We just wanted to see a little bit.
I would someday really like to have a discussion with you about healthcare policy, and also about experiments, because there are not only local experiments that go on and state level experiments, that go on, but there's a considerable amount of empirical evidence, from international experience with different kinds of healthcare systems, and results there that have to be taken into account also. So we
absolutely.
We have a lot of empirical evidence already to draw upon. And in fact, well, I'm not going to go into this part of it at all. But I do think that you're well set up to be a great moderator for the first panel. And I'm really looking forward to your discussion in that particular panel, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate that.
Okay, so let's, so we'll be right back with our next guest. All right.
Excellent. Thank you, Joe. You guys have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of your day.
The same to you, Joe, and I look forward to further conversations with you in the future.
Sounds good.
Bye.
All right, now we're back with Andy Kennedy, the host of Panel 3, who's going to be moderating it. So, Andy, where do you want to take this discussion? We just talked to Joe Evans, who says he wants to address, because he also has the get money out of politics thing. He's like, I want to address the problems in Panel 1 and let you take, because you're part 2 of that conversation. So, what do you want to do with that?
Well, see, I think that my discussion is going to be set up to the point where I'm talking to 3 gentlemen that have been candidates, and they had to deal with that, right? Because all 3 of these candidates were grassroots funded. And if you're looking at the broader picture of the United States right now, with a 6-3 conservative majority in the Supreme Court, is the Citizens United decision going to be overturned anytime soon? Probably not. So then what do you do if you're going to run? How do you approach it? What's the best way to fundraise? What's the best way to get your name out there, right? And that goes with a broader picture of, if mainstream media is going to ignore you because of your political leanings, then that's when people like us come into play, right? If we can coordinate and organize and get a big enough audience, then we negate mainstream media's advantage in this, right? And we make it a little more fair. Which politician had the most money raised in the history of United States politics? The one candidate in the last election that didn't take any corporate money. How'd that work? Right? So that's I think a solutions based thing that I can talk to each 3 of these gentlemen about. And another thing that I'm very happy about the choice of people that are going to be on my panel is that they all ran for federal office, but they all took very different routes to get there. And I think that that's a really good starting point for a discussion of how one candidate in California, got onto the Democratic ticket, and then the Arkansas candidate ran as an independent, and then the difference between both Shahid and Dan running in 2020 during a pandemic versus Brent, who ran in 2018 before that, right? So there's a lot of contrasts there that we can look, and we can kind of balance and see what's the best thing to do. What made you fairly successful? What did you find worked for you in this space? And I think that's an equally important conversation to have, especially for people on our side that are considering some kind of political run in the United States. So that's the way I want to take it. And I think I could probably get 45 minutes of conversation with the questions.
When I saw the topic, this panel, the first thing I thought of with respect to get money out of politics is, if these people were elected, what would be the policies they would advocate in order to get money out of politics? For example, many people are saying, well, let's have a constitutional amendment. Let's have a constitutional convention. Well, if we went for the constitutional amendment, even if we passed it the first time out, it would probably be 6, 7, 8 years before, it was ratified. And even if it was entirely successful, we'd be waiting a decade to actually get money out of politics. And we don't have a decade to wait, to get money out of politics. Right. So the question is, are there practical things that we can do now in terms of policies that will get money out of politics? And I think there are practical things, that can be done. And I wonder if any of these candidates would know what kinds of things could be done.
Well, sure. And I think that's a discussion worth having as well. how do you affect capitalists, right? You take away their ability to make capital. How did the owner of the Washington Football Club, who 10 years ago said that if you want to change the name of my team, it'll be Over My Dead Body. How did that happen? Well, a certain small corporation called FedEx, which is one of the major sponsors of the Washington Football Club, just had a little economic pressure put on it and said, okay, we're changing the name now. Okay. Right. So, I mean,
however,
if you're
the owner of the football team, I think it was 10 years ago. I believe the owner of the football team from 10 years ago is someone who has died since. Wasn't that a factor in the change of their tune as well?
I'm not sure if how when that actually, what the timeline of that was.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Right. It may have it may have caused his death, you know.
He was certainly alive maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, maybe it came true, you know. He Over My Dead Body. Okay, good. We can change
However,
it now.
what I was thinking of though specifically is what can be done in the short run to make campaign finance legislation basically to protect it from the Supreme Court.
Right.
It's that issue that I thought might be worth focusing upon in this panel, whether any of the candidates had any ideas about that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had discussions, like we've had previous discussions with both Dan and Shahid. I've not met Brent. Looking forward to talking to him tomorrow, but certainly both are learned gentlemen with some great fresh ideas, and I'm sure that they would have some nice innovative opinions about those things. Certainly. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think that especially Shahid with running in a place where he was basically ignored, right? Probably one of the single most first-time candidates that possibly could have been the most effective, quote unquote, progressive congressperson, and he was completely ignored to the extent of Pelosi's office even ignoring his call for a debate, that they were so fearful of talking to him. Very thoughtful gentleman. I'm very looking forward to hearing his opinions on a number of
No.
And then after they ignored him, they created a fake scandal.
Yes.
In case there were some people who were not ignoring him.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up is you're talking a little bit about running against an entrenched incumbent, Pelosi, or I guess in Dan's case, Tom Cotton. Although Brent didn't actually run against an entrenched incumbent, he was running for an open seat. So that part of the discussion I'm not sure where Brent will fit into that part of your discussion.
Right. And I'm not sure because I don't know because it was 18. I'll have to dig into it.
Yeah, it was 2018.
Because if it's coming up in because I'm not sure what even happened in 2020 in his specific
right, there was no
specific
incumbent.
district.
It was an open primary. So
right.
For him,
And from what I understand, he came very close to winning as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes, he did come fairly close to winning, but he was running against Sharice Davids,
Right.
Who's a Native American, and they ran, the identity politics shtick against him.
Right.
Okay, he was running as a Sanders Democrat.
Yes, and I believe in 16 he was actually part of the Bernie Sanders brain trust, was he not?
I don't recall that, whether he was in 2016, but Bernie went down there in 2018 to campaign for him.
Right.
And Ocasio-Cortez also went down there to campaign for him. Okay? And they had just a wonderful campaign event for him as well. I mean, they had the house really rocking down there. But, at that point.
Right.
And it looked like that he had a really good chance to win the primary. But something funny happened on election night. He was leading until about 9:30 or so, having a substantial lead. And there was no reason to believe that things were going to change as certain other parts of the district that came in. Suddenly, the count was frozen, and there was no news for about an hour and a half. And when the hour and a half was over, suddenly Sharice Davids was in the lead. And she stayed in that lead. And to this day, I don't know if anybody investigated that, but to me, it smelled to high heaven. I was watching that race in 2018 very, very carefully. And boy, I just had the feeling there was machine rigging in that race. And I'm not sure that it was by the Democrats, because a similar thing happened in the Republican contest for governor. And I don't know how this would have happened, but the rigging in Kansas might have taken place in such a way that it impacted his race.
Right.
The fraction magic that they, sometimes use might specifically have hurt him. I don't know whether they intended to hurt him or not, but I kind of suspect that's what happened.
It might very well that the answer to your questions, Joe, might be in Hillary's emails.
So when it comes to Shahid running against an entrenched incumbent like Pelosi, this is the third time he's running, I think. He can outrun her, technically. He can run about 5 or 6 more times, then she'll retire, and his name recognition may get so great in that state that, or in that district, that he can literally just outrun her, literally.
Yes. I guess certainly that could be the case. It's the the psychological effect of running and losing that that might be something that might take its toll after a while. But what I know of Shahid, his virtuous guy and running for the right reasons, not the wrong ones. So it'll certainly be interesting. I find, that the minute that you get a little bit of name recognition, it certainly increases your chances exponentially. And we've seen that on a number of different fronts. So who knows? I think that a lot of getting the word out per se, falls on us, right? I mean, we're the voice of indie media, and we've got to find a way to fight the algorithms and get our voices out there as a cohesive unit. That's a lot of the key, right? I've talked to personally with Jordan Sheridan and Fiorella and Craig, and they're just getting a beat down by the different platforms. And so there has to be solution to that, and I think that includes us banding together and with it, maybe not a single voice, but at least a cohesive message and moving forward in that way, because it's otherwise we're spinning our wheels, right?
Yes.
Definitely. Now,
Indeed.
can you tell everybody who's watching a little bit, so they can get to know you as a moderator, a little bit about yourself, your involvement in independent media, something about yourself as well, and let's go to that.
Sure. Well, I'm a retired electrician of all things, and I worked my worked 30 years in an automotive plant in central Ontario in Canada, and I retired in 2017. I've also been a musician, so I've been a performer for quite a number of years as well. So stepping into this role, although I wouldn't say it was easy, at least I was used to, performing on a certain level in this space. My start was kind of maybe a little bit behind, but fairly similar to Joe's start at Real Progressives, and doing some graphics designing and some editing of audio and video stuff. And I've been the executive producer of a podcast called Macro and Cheese for 2.5 years. And so kind of translated that into an understanding of MMT, and as I call it, economics by osmosis. Editing the podcasts of the likes of Mr. Warren Mosler and L. Randall Ray and Pavlina Chernova and Stephanie and Fadl Kaboub and certainly the biggest advocates in the MMT community. And so I've taken that and kind of run with it. I've translated that to Carrie and my show, Hair of the Dog, that we do in syndication now, and I call it the certainly MMT friendly, right? I'm not going to preach it to you, but don't you dare ask me how you're going to pay for it. And so, it's by the way, I did have the right answer to the last segment, Joe, that if you want to fund healthcare, you got to turn to the currency issuer, not the currency user.
Of course.
Right.
How are you going to pay for that?
California may get away with it for a while, but you're pretty much screwed if you think North Dakota or Montana is going to be able to do a state-run free healthcare system.
Yeah, right. So you really don't have a choice for the states unless the federal government is providing the money.
Exactly.
If the federal government is funding, then you might be able to afford to have some states say, well, we're not going to go this way, or we're not going to go that way.
Exactly. Well, as I asked Rohan Gray, said, like, if you guys are going to mint a couple of $1 trillion platinum coins, I mean, if you're going to make 2, can you make 3? I mean, I've got big pockets.
Yeah, my own prescription is not to fool around and just do the 100 T coin.
Yeah.
In the first place. I mean, after all, they can't spend it until Congress appropriates it anyway.
Yeah.
If you just sit there,
we'll just keystroke the money, Joe, and we'll let the Treasury and the Fed fight it out for themselves.
Absolutely.
Every time they want to finance something, somebody goes into the executive lounge in the Fed and pulls the cushions out of the couch and somehow finds $2 trillion in coins. Right. So that's a big couch.
It's a big vault.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of stuff in it.
As Warren would say, or Randy Ray would say, as long as there's one guy with one finger in the Federal Reserve that can keystroke the money.
That's all we need.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah. So I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow. I must admit that I'm very new at the interview game. Carrie asked me to be her sidekick for Hair of the Dog, a year ago. And I said, as long as, find somebody who's good to replace me. And, in a way that I was going to hold seats while the important people went to the bathroom during the awards show. And it ended up that I enjoyed what I was doing and said, okay, well, maybe I'll stick around, do it a little bit longer. It's been a blast. And it's a little bit of nerves, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I think once we get started, that's that we've got some amazing people that can actually suggest some solutions. And as long as we have enough ears to listen to it, then I think we're in good shape. So,
Oh yeah, this panel looks great.
I really appreciate it, KRTD and the whole crew inviting me to do this. It's was actually thrilled when Carrie told me that was asked to be a host. So hopefully I don't screw up too bad.
Oh,
Definitely.
you won't. Don't
I
worry.
have to go on camera the next day and apologize like a Republican governor.
Yeah. This is all of us doing it together. This is KRTD. This is Independent Left. This is Joe Firestone with his advisement, and this is Hair Up the Dog. All of us together putting
Yes.
on this great show.
Oh, and I think it's going to be amazing. And, I think I'm hoping that this is the start of a number of these, right? Because if we can keep a dialogue open between us, there's a lot of big names here that have a large audience, right? If we can intermix our audiences together, we can start to actually make a difference. And
Definitely.
that makes all the difference, right?
Yeah, if we can have a solution summit every 90 days,
And that's the goal.
it's
Absolutely.
really going to have tremendous impact.
And then I'm looking forward to the after party where we can get into some different solutions. Well, I'm in Canada, so we don't have as much vaccine here. So I've been, taking a weekly tequila shot.
Ah,
Yeah, much better than the Moderna or the Pfizer. So, my opinion.
Sure.
all right. So thanks for coming on. Thanks
Thank
everybody
you.
for tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow at the U.S. Solution Summit, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in another time zone, figure it out yourself.
Okay, it was great to meet you, Andy.
Yes.
Oh, wait, actually, we forgot. We have one more guest. Oops.
Oh no.
So,
Oh, Reef.
that's right, Reef.
That's,
All right.
Don't worry, Reef. It's the best for last.
Don't worry,
All right,
I'm just the man behind the curtain.
With a good light show.
Pause.
All right.
All right, well, get me the hell out of here. It was nice to meet you, Joe. I'll see you all tomorrow.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right. Oh, oops. All right, everybody, we're back for you with our final interview. This with Reeve Freeland. He's hardly done anything for the summit. No, I'm just kidding. He's gonna be moderating a couple of panels. He's doing all the production for 5 hours straight.
5 hours. Yep.
Not that much he's doing.
Not that
so,
I've been counting the minutes at all, So,
So-
not to mention all the late night hours me and Indy Left have put into this to make sure that this is running the way it should run with these kind
Now,
of
those of
things.
us at KRTD have hardly been doing anything. There's really nothing to this event.
Yeah, no, it's not been a complete, migraine-inducing nightmare at all.
No.
It's
No,
actually,
there's one, two, three.
it actually hasn't. It's been pretty good. We definitely put in late nights early so that we didn't have to scramble last minute. So, we got our
All right, so-
production scaled up and stuff. But yeah, I'm hosting the education panel with Steph,
You're hosting the education panel. Yeah, go
Madeline,
ahead.
and Jeff. My mother's been in the education system since I've been alive for the most part, and she's taught pretty much at every grade level, from college to elementary school to pre-K. I mean, she's done literally everything as far as education is concerned. So I have a pretty good understanding of the issues there.
So where do you want to lead that conversation?
Well, I want to lead with, I think a lot of them talked about, just now we had both Jeff, and Howie talk about, charter schools and things like that, and that's a big issue. I grew up in an area where the public school was the only school in the county, right? But there was that one school that was the Christian charter school that, when you had people that had to transfer out of that school to ours, they were not prepared. They were not on the same level that we were, and of course they got more funding, because not only did the people who sent their kids there have to pay, but they were also, had grants and public funding and all that stuff on top of that. So, that's definitely a big issue there. Tenure and teacher salary right now is a big issue, right? You're talking about, I think me and my mother worked it up for the average amount of hours a teacher works and the average salary that they get. You're looking at $15 an hour minimum, right? Which, how much of your salary from that is going to, school supplies for your children and commute to work and a lot of that stuff. And in my opinion, they should be some of the highest paid people in any county for the most part.
In other countries, they put their teachers the highest level of respect.
I forget where I heard it, but being a teacher is like being a stand-up comedian with a terrible audience that has no reference on where you're coming from and don't understand the material, and you're supposed to have a good show every night. That's not an easy thing. You're walking into a room where you don't know where everyone's at, and you're having to get them to a level. And now you look at you talk about standardized testing and stuff like that is brought into it, right? Where teachers aren't even really allowed to teach what they think the curriculum is. It's what the state thinks the curriculum is, right? So, and they get lesson plans and stuff from the state at this point, and it's a whole complicated mess that when you ask teachers, they go, yeah, I'm just dealing with it, because teachers are some of the best people on the planet for the most part. They're willing to jump through all the hoops just so that their kids are, have some understanding. And the whole education system, from what we're teaching to what we're preparing our kids for, and the fact that not everyone can go to college right now because public college isn't a thing, right? I mean, for 45 minutes, you're not even going to be able to scratch the surface on those issues, but hopefully some solutions will be put up that we can definitely start acting upon. So
and you're also moderating another panel. Why don't you talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah, election integrity with Franco and Kit and Daniel and Craig. Yep. And hard lens and Frank analysis and pasta.
Half the convo couch.
Half the convo couch. So I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to cut the couch in half or, something. But like, I think that needs to be addressed, or at least get them like some love seats or something, you know. But no, I think that's those four guys have been working on that, particular issue for a while now, and have been, smeared and, mudslinged at them for a
Mm.
multitude of reasons. Like, look, journalism is hard. These people are putting themselves in the hard places to make sure that they get the information and that they understand the facts. And, you know, sometimes you swing and a miss, but I think they've all done a pretty good job of trying to look at our elections as, as much as I wish our elections were what they're supposed to be, they're not. Right? With, you look at election security of, I think there was a study done at one point where they sent like a high school coding class, and they were able to hack into, voting machines and stuff like that pretty easily, right? Not to mention the fact that those voting machine companies are already getting donations from, elected officials. And that whole fiasco with, forgive me, what was the one of the first primaries where, there was the whole, trying to remember, was it Buttigieg that was involved with that, right?
In the Iowa primary?
I think it was that one, right, where there was this whole,
Yeah, his
where,
campaign had paid for part of the app, right?
yeah, where and then the app goes down right when, like, look, let's face it, if Sanders had won that, right, which you then have Buttigieg coming out after that talking about, oh, he had won and it was a tough race, when he hadn't.
The other thing
Right.
is they stole that race. Whoever wins the first election, they're supposed to get, the press is supposed to cover them. It's supposed to be a whole big deal. They kind of stole that from Bernie,
Yeah.
from getting that momentum that would have come from Iowa. They,
And
they
this
stole that.
and this feeds into, rank.
They moved to New Hampshire. I know Bernie won, okay,
Yeah.
in New Hampshire. When you looked at a comparison of the exit polling there to the actual vote distribution,
Yeah.
okay, occurred in the end, there were major discrepancies between the two. And those discrepancies were correlated to districts in which certain voting machines existed.
Yeah. When I remember, I've remembered this issue's been going on. I remember, those hacktivists over at Anonymous were looking at pipelines at one point between, Republican, candidates and what was going on there, and they had caught them essentially digitally stuffing ballots. There's this issue is by no means one that's been dealt with yet. So it's and then on top of the binary system of our political parties, makes it to where you're either going to have to try to deal with both parties' establishment going through primaries and stuff like that, which they're more than willing to, most Republicans believe in voter fraud, right, as opposed to election fraud, which I'm not under that opinion. I think election fraud is much more common and likely and rampant, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
When they're able to cut, voting places at the drop of a hat, and there's a lot going on there. And look, people on that panel had been accused of being, bad faith actors because they went to, the insurrection, right? And covered it. They covered that as a story, like journalists are supposed to, right?
Oh no,
And
you can't do that.
no, and for them, their argument was, these people on the Trump side of things who feel like their election is stolen, they pretty much were there going, yeah, join the club. So do we, right? We feel like our elections were stolen, right? And you ask people, Trump supporters, about Bernie Sanders, and most of them will tell you, yeah, he got cheated out of this, right? And he's still, even through that election tampering, was at what percent of the vote both times? I mean, when he was against Clinton, he was almost at like, you know, half the party, right? So, you know, I think
Well, it's everybody under. It was mostly 45 and younger went for
yeah,
Bernie.
right. But I mean,
Those are the margins.
it was definitely percentage wise, he was looking at 40 some percent,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, it was like 43% of the delegates.
And that's if you believe those numbers.
Right. That's if you believe those numbers. Right.
So
Okay.
even
And if
even
you don't believe those numbers, he was at 57%.
57%, yeah, or at 100% if we're gonna, you know, if we're gonna like assume. But like, to me, it's one of those things where, like, look, even with this tampering, it's hard to keep these cats in the bag. You know, there's only, and that's what you saw at this insurrection, right? People are fed up generally about their system not working for them, right? And it's become to the point where it's such blatant, you know, blatant things that establishment is willing to do, and because they know we can almost do nothing about it, right? And you know, I think these four people on this panel have worked to make sure that people who are paying attention are still aware of what's happening. So I think they have solutions for this too. I think that they're all understanding.
And then the other part of your panel is direct action versus electoral politics.
Right, which
Where's
is
the
which
left
is what
most
I'm.
effective?
Which, you know, you look at the political system now, you know, and as much as Howie Hawkins say we need both, we've been doing both. We've been doing that, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there does have to be a shift to at least different direct action, right? You know, we need to be able to hold the politicians that we send to Congress that we can get through this elections system to be able to do the risky things that we need them to do, so that we can get more people in Congress that are willing to do those risky things.
So do we
Right.
still?
So when we get
Yeah,
direct action, maybe we need some general strikes.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely.
general
strikes
strike.
are a massive tool that people around the world are starting to figure out they can use. Right?
Yep.
You know, you have big general strikes in India, in South America, in Mexico, right? You know, there's huge
And of
strikes
course,
going on.
Palestine in the last week.
Right, but you wouldn't know about those things unless you were either in those countries dealing with it, or the ones here in the United States. What strike, you know, got mainstream coverage in the last like 3 years, 4 years, then some?
You got to go back 40 years.
You got to go back till, you know, Cronkite is going to take off his glasses to tell you, right? You know, and like, I don't know what happened to those journalists, but you know, strikes are such a big thing for workers, you know, as well as stronger unions, things like that, right? You know, I mean, there's been, it's just, for me, that the direct action thing, as far as you know, we definitely have to start working outside of electoral politics, because we, you know, we can't trust these idols that the left want to idealize.
So, in your mind, do we still keep running Greens and other third parties and progressive Democrats in
definitely.
addition to
Yeah.
everything else that we're doing with the general strikes?
And, you know,
we
and
keep
more-
running the third
Absolutely. But what we ought to do in terms of the general strikes,
Yeah.
the kinds of things, okay, that we ought to be demanding with respect to the general strikes, involve things like having audits of every single election, real audits, formal audits.
Right.
So they know
by
the people who
unbiased.
written,
Yep.
by unbiased. We've got to insist.
And then the other thing is, with election
If
integrity,
those recounts work out in such a way that the winner doesn't win,
Yep.
then the winner gets out of office.
Yeah.
now the other thing is, why isn't the Green Party or the Libertarian Party or PSL invited to any of these audits, or for that matter, invited to look at the ballot counting? They ran candidates too, and they say, hey, we just got to have a Democrat and Republican here.
Right.
Howie Hawkins.
That's one thing that we ought to demand also, okay, in the general strikes.
Right.
That all the people who are part of the election, any party, has to have a right to see the audit,
Yeah.
see the counting, and to observe. It's got to be open to all. There can be no preference for the major parties.
And I think with the parties in general, you look at like, I feel like there should be more cooperation with these third parties, that make it to where, like if you're gonna run in the Democratic Party, right, because you feel like the Greens can't get you on the ballot, or MPP can't get you on the ballot, or whatever, right? Having these people be able to support you even in another party, and that you're able to actively work with them and say that you align with their belief system and their stuff, and you support their candidates, right, even though you're not in that party, and I'm sure
So,
libertarians are in that right too, that on issues we're together there, right, on a lot of
so
issues.
in your world, let's say Ro Khanna could endorse a Madeline Hoffman.
Yeah,
There'd be no problem with that.
absolutely. Or vice versa, depends on how Ro wants to do stuff this week. But
Right.
Ro, if you're watching, figure it out. But
Make that endorsement.
yeah, just figure it out, bud. But it's one of those things where it's like, look, the left gets segmented so much because we're made to, right? And it's frustrating because the people we feel like are going to be firebrands to go in there don't, right? They don't go in there and stand for things like election integrity, or they don't take out incumbents what they get, entrenched people once they get there. They're not willing to support risky candidates, right? And they're definitely not willing to support outside their party, right? Which is frustrating, right? But I'm hoping that third party candidates going forward are willing to bring those people
Cross
in.
endorsements.
Well, I think it's more of like, I get where the third parties are at too, right? Why support when they could be on your side, right? I mean,
Why not?
obviously, yeah. I mean, that's I agree with that too. So it's a situation where the whole system is set up for them not to be able to do what they need to.
No, the thing, it costs me nothing if I'm running with the Green Party.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah,
a candidate with PSL or
you want to
Party.
support Tulsi because she's got an issue you like. Well, then you do that.
Exactly. And the other
You
thing
know?
is, even among third party cooperation, if I'm a member of the Greens and I see there's a great candidate in PSL,
Now, I know.
why
know-
can't I endorse them?
For the election integrity stuff, I know that the Sanders campaign for a period of time during the 2016, I didn't see it as much in the recent primary, right? But they would have applications that you could go on and send information about how your caucus was going, or what specific things that you had seen that would make you question whether this integrity was there or whatever, right? There was some whistleblowing outlets for them to use, which is a big thing. And I live in Florida, right? Tim Canova has been dealing with this for a while now against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, right? When he can't even see his own ballots, right? Because they burned them. I don't know what they did with them.
Oh yeah, they stole the election from him twice.
Twice, right? And what is he supposed to do about it? He did what he's supposed to do. He did all the right things. I mean, he's already suing them, I think there's litigation already there. But it's not going to get coverage. They're going to pay for the best lawyers in the business to get it off on a technicality, right?
Yeah.
So
he still got screwed, and he sank a bunch of his own money into his campaign.
Yeah. Which is the other, I talked to other countries, and public funding of elections is something that they have already adopted, and that that the government should give some stipend to make sure that we don't have to have these people connected to big money interest, right? That if you're running for office and you get enough signatures on a paper, well then here's 20,000 to get on the news, or whatever, right? And of course that there's all sorts of bylaws that have to go with that, but I mean, it's just like the you know, my big thing is election security, and definitely the difference between, like, you do have to have both. You have to have electoral politics still happen, right? It's just electoral politics is not set up for anything to happen quickly, which is, you know, once those two graphs, if they don't align quite right, people start building guillotines, right? So, you know, at some point, at some point they're going to have to decide whether that they want, you know, like when people start buying too many grindstones, they'll realize, okay.
And why, right? And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, your Discord server, all
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
I run the Jimmy Dore Show Discord server. Um, you know, you're free to check that out. I'll put it up on my Twitter, right? At
Let's
Ray
put a
Freeland.
link as well in the live chat.
Yep, I can do that as well. But let me go grab that while I'm talking. But yeah, that's given me, you know, Jimmy, as much as I love him, can be, you know, a complicated kettle of fish for people, and you know, I tend to have to moderate in there pretty heavily, right? For people who, you know, want to call him a grifter when they don't understand what's really going on, right? So, you know, I think I think it's given me a pretty good set of skills to be able to get people on a lot of sides of the, you know, aisle to come together there and look at just the issues, which is complicated for people to do. So I also grew up here in the Bible Belt South, right? I cut my teeth during the Obama administration, right? You know, arguing politics and stuff like that. So, you know, that's not, you know, that's not an easy thing to do. And, you know, I tell candidates all the time that if you're in a rural area, right, you might as well go for it. You know, lukewarmity is not what's going to get you anywhere there. Either you're going to have issues and stances that you can actually stand behind, right, and they'll respect you for it, right, or they won't respect you because you're wishy-washy. That's the only two things you got. So I feel like if you're going to be a liberal in the South, might as well be a complete one. You know, don't half-ass it, as my father would say. You know, if it's worth doing.
You mean like the candidate they got to run against Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or
Booker?
yeah.
No, the woman. What's her name?
Oh, you mean Amy? What was her name?
I want to say Johnston, but I don't think I know who you're talking about.
No.
Yeah,
But she
both know what I'm
pretended,
talking about. She was the Air Force
Yeah,
queen.
right.
and she had pretended to be a progressive when she ran in the House, and then she did this, and then she ran as a pro-Trump Democrat. It was really weird.
Yeah, she's weird.
So and that's my point, was that if I had done that back then, it wouldn't have gone. You know, I was called everything in the book, from a socialist to a commie to a whatever. But at the end of the day, I would give them arguments that they couldn't argue with. They would just have to ad hominem me, and that was about it. And now most of those same people, when you look at Fox looking at issues, their own polls, you get Republicans with 60% approval rating of Medicare for all, right? You get Republicans at like 70 to 80% approval of legalization of marijuana, right? You know, whereas during those Obama years, that wouldn't have happened. You wouldn't have got
Amy
them to move
McGrath.
on that issue. No,
Yes, Amy McGrath, that's right.
yeah. So you know, I think now you look at issue by issue basis, right? American politics is extremely left wing, you know. So, but you know, I mean, you know, I that and like religion in the Bible Belt South is a whole nother kettle of fish that involves religion and politics and evangelical support, and you know, there's a lot of complicated stuff there that you'd had to maneuver around and be careful around. And you know, I lived in towns where, you know, if you didn't go to that First Baptist church on Sunday, something was wrong with you, right? And
Right.
I didn't go, so obviously something was wrong with me. So, you know, but
Definitely. And
not
we do
that
have
not that I didn't go to youth group and get pizza and Mountain Dew when they offered, but you know, but yeah,
we
I
do
mean,
gotta wrap up here, but
yes, sir. So, but I'm super excited for this event. I think it's a big lineup, and I'm super excited about who's going to be here. And I want, I love these kind of conversations with people who think like I do, right? And a lot of times it feels like you're the man on the island alone in with these political thoughts, right? So being able to come together with people who at least are on the same page with you, and it's a good thing.
Definitely.
So,
And you're not going to be alone tomorrow.
no, sir.
No, sir, not at all.
No, we're gonna have
All
quite a few guests. So feel free to come check it out. And but yeah, I think that's us signing off, right?
All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks Joe for coming here to co-host tonight.
Okay, my pleasure.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care, guys.
you.